Good morning, everybody. So today what we're going to be doing, unfortunately, because of the vast amount of e-learning that we've had this week, we have the unfortunate event of having to do notes electronically, but that's okay. We will get it done. So if you do not have your notebook out in front of you, go ahead. I'll give you a second to do that really quick. Okay. All right, so once you have your notebook out, if I was in your shoes, I would simply just title our notes Congress because we're going to do short notes. First, we're going to look at gerrymandering, which we're going to fly through that because you guys should have already been looking at gerrymandering the last 2 days on your other e-learning assignments. And then after that, we're going to look at the setup of Congress, and specifically today, we're going to look at the setup of the House of Representatives. So let's go ahead. Let's get started, shall we? So first off, gerrymandering. We need a good overall definition as to what gerrymandering actually is. Okay, what is it? So gerrymandering is simply the manipulation of um, voting districts or voting boundaries to favor one political party over another. So within each state, they are given a certain number of districts based off of their population. Okay, and however many districts they get will equal to the amount of representatives that the state gets in the House. So obviously, we have to figure out, okay, what is the population of said state? So step one, a national census is to take place every 10 years. And then based off of that national census, we will then reassign the number of representatives that each state gets in the House. Okay, so we can see here on this map, Indiana, we really don't have that many representatives compared to the states surrounding us. Indiana, we only have 9 representatives in the House. Illinois has 18, okay, so double us. But then you look at some of the other bigger states, and you'll notice California has 53 over here. Texas has 36. Florida has 27. New York 27. Pennsylvania 18. So Indiana with a measly 9, but it is better than some states that only have, one representative like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska. So that's step two, reassign number of representatives in the House. Our final step is then we have to draw out our new districts. Okay. And it's really up to the state legislatures to do so. However, the state legislatures don't necessarily have to do it themselves. They could hire an outside organization to draw those boundaries for them. But think about it for a second. If you live in a state whose legislature is controlled by the Democrats, well, then that state legislature is probably going to try to draw out the districts in the state to favor the Democratic Party. So let's look at some examples of these districts and really gerrymandering taking place. Okay, so here's an example of the evolution of North Carolina's 12th congressional district, and you can see over the years how that district has changed. Um, Pretty crazy, right? Here is another example in Ohio of gerrymandering taking place. Here is gerrymandering taking place in Louisiana. There's another good one here in Texas. Okay, so keep in mind as we're looking at these districts, each district gets one representative for it. And if you're living in that district, you have the same representative. So here's another example up in Illinois. Okay. So now let's look really quick at the evolution of Indiana's districts. Okay, so this first map here is the Indiana congressional districts from 1973 to 1982. And you can see here, it looks like Shelbyville would land right here in this district currently. So in the 70s, so Shelbyville would have been in District 6. There's really not that much gerrymandering taking place here. We can see here though, like this is a little wonky. Over here, a couple weird things, but not really that bad. All right, but then we look at today, and it changes quite dramatically. So this is Indiana's congressional district since 2013. Shelbyville is here still in District 6. So everybody living in District 6, your representative is Greg Pence. Now, again, not really that much gerrymandering taking place until we really look at Indianapolis. You can start to see it's pretty wonky. Okay. But again, all of this is simply to help give one political party advantage over another in winning seats in the House of Representatives. So let's now look at some of the basic information surrounding the House. A lot of this should be review for us. So the House of Representatives, if you are a representative in the House, you are reelected every 2 years. You have a 2-year term. There are 435 members in the House. That number has not changed since 1913. And you might ask yourself, well, why hasn't it changed? And there are a couple different answers that we could give for this. It's up to Congress itself to add members to it. I want you to think about this. If we have 435 members within one body of Congress, it might be hard, to get stuff done in terms of writing legislation, debating legislation, things of that nature. So then think about adding, 150 more people to that 435, and you can see that while it might be good to add people to the House because you would be more representative or represented, it would just be much harder to get things done. Now, what's kind of cool to think about is the average residence per member in the House. So in 1793, one representative in the House on average represented about 35,000 people. In 2013, one representative in the House on average represented about 710,000 people. And so we can see that the founders would not really recognize the representation that is currently taking place in the House. So we just looked at this. Representatives are reapportioned every 10 years, okay, based on the national census that takes place. Now, one of the things that we're going to look at quite a bit this unit is the idea that there are no term limits within Congress. So for the House of Representatives, you turn 25, you're eligible now to be a representative in the House. Theoretically, you could be there until the day that you die. Okay, because again, there are no term limits, and you have a 91% chance of being reelected. So it's a pretty good gig. Okay, a lot of job security there. Now, we just said that every 2 years, we have a new quote unquote election taking place to change the House of Representatives. And with that, we also bring about rules every 2 years. The House of Representatives, they set up their own rules as to what happens within the chamber itself. You will not find rules within the Constitution saying, what the House of Representatives does in terms of how long they can debate on bills and things of that nature. The Constitution actually says that is up to the officers within the House. So the rules that they make every 2 years are usually designed to move legislation through the chamber as fast as possible. And think about that for a second. If you have 435 members within the House, chances are they're all writing and making laws and trying to get them passed. And so we need to get through all of this. And so debating on bills within the House usually lasts just roughly 1 day. When we talk about the Senate, that will be very different. Okay. Now, the other thing to think about with the House of Representatives is that party affiliation is extremely important. If you are a member of the Republican Party, you are expected to fall in line and follow the leadership of the Republican Party. You are expected to get behind Republican created bills. And it's also important, and we'll look here in just a second, for committees. And the same goes for the Democratic Party. If you're a member of the Democratic Party, you're expected to fall in line, listen to the leaders, and support bills created by the Democratic Party. Now, our current House was just changed with our last election cycle. And so right now, the House of Representatives is currently controlled by the Democratic Party. They have 221 members, whereas the Republican Party has 211. So there you go. All right, for our last part of our notes today, we are going to look very briefly at the leadership that takes place within the House of Representatives. And you might recognize this lady right here on your screens. That is Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She's very famous. She is on the news every day. But a lot of people really don't know, like what she does. Okay, we know that she's the Speaker of the House. We know she's an important part of the Democratic Party. We know that she's one of the most powerful persons in the United States. However, like I just said, a lot of people really don't know what she actually does. So one of her main roles as Speaker of the House is she is in charge of appointing members to different committees. Now, committees within the House are there to help review legislation, change legislation, and things of that nature. So let's say, for example, that you're a member of the House of Representatives and you have been put on a committee that has to do with education. Being a member of that committee, you would be tasked with reviewing different legislation that has to do with education. Okay, so pretty important role. The next thing the Speaker of the House does is they determine what bills actually make it to committees. So if you're a Republican, and the Speaker of the House is Democrat, it might be hard to get your bill to a committee in the first place to be reviewed for the process. The next thing that the Speaker of the House does is known as keeping decorum in the House. That means making sure that the rules are being followed, that people are quote unquote acting civilly, and like I said, following the rules, keep people in line, that sort of thing. Make sure that we're not screaming at each other, talking over each other. Make sure that there's order within the House chambers while the House is in session. And then lastly, the Speaker of the House is considered the official spokesperson of the House. And that's why when there's anything that has to do with the House of Representatives, you best believe you're going to see Nancy Pelosi up there talking about what the House is going to do and the legislation that they're trying to get passed. Okay. All right. The next main leadership role that we're going to look at is the House Majority Leader. So the House Majority Leader, they help plan the party's legislative program. They are really the right-hand man to the Speaker of the House. So the House of Representatives is controlled by the Democratic Party. The Speaker of the House is going to be a Democrat, and the House Majority Leader is also going to be a Democrat. And we know this because, the word majority. The next thing that the House Majority Leader does is they help steer important bills through the House. They try to make sure that the bills get through committees on time, things of that nature. And they really help make sure that the chairpersons of committees finish work on bills that are important to the party. It's sort of the idea of, hey, we have this new, education bill that we're trying to get through the House. And the House Majority Leader would go to the, committee that is looking at education bills, and they would go, hey, dog, let's make sure we get this finished. Let's make sure that we get this through the committee. And let's make sure that we get this finished. Okay. And then the last major leader within the House is known as the majority whip. And the majority whip's job is simply to keep party members in line. If you are a Democrat, you better vote with your party, and it's up to the majority whip to do that. Okay, we're almost finished. We got about 5 minutes left. The last thing we're going to look at is House law making. Okay, so after a committee has considered and approved a major bill, it will then usually go to the Rules Committee. We'll look at that in just a second. So the very, very first thing that happens is a member of the House has to introduce legislation. And the way they do that, there is a specific box within the chambers of the House where that legislation will then be dropped off for review, and the Speaker of the House will review those legislation or legislative pieces. So then the second step is the Speaker can then send that that bill to the committee that it is assigned to, where within the committee they will study it, they will discuss it, and they will review it. Okay. Now, like I just said, after a committee has considered and approved a major bill, it then will go usually to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is often considered, the most powerful committee in the House of Representatives, and that's because it has the job of moving bills ahead quickly, holding them back, or stopping them completely in the process. It is really the last check before that bill is sent to the House floor to be voted on. So step 4, if your bill makes it past all of this committee process, it is then going to go on the House calendar where it will eventually be sent to the House floor for debate and vote. Okay. In order to have your bill pass the House of Representatives, you just need a simple majority for it to pass. So 218 of 435, which if you remember earlier, we said that currently the Democrats control the House with 221. So they have a simple majority of the House of Representatives. All right, guys, we went through that process pretty quickly. We did our notes in about 17 minutes. Tomorrow in class, we will be looking at this a little bit further, more in depth, because today was a good outline for what we're going to be looking at in the days to come. So if you have any questions, you can log on to the Google Meet that I'll set up until noon, or you can send me an email. But until then, I will see you later.